What if Jupiter is in Cancer in the ninth house? That's what we're going to discuss now. So this is the fifth installment in my series of Jupiter in the ninth house in each zodiac sign. In the first installment, we sorted out a basic interpretive template for what Jupiter in the ninth house generically represents. Basically, Jupiter in the ninth house represents being very ethically driven, being driven by your ethics and your beliefs. Also, it represents being quite intelligent and therefore being a natural guide or a natural leader. And finally, it's very prosperous and fruitful, and therefore quite attractive as a mate. Now, let's take that basic template and put it into a specific setting. Jupiter in Cancer in the ninth house. Now, that sounds like the most storybook jackpot classical setting you could possibly get. Jupiter in Cancer in the ninth house. So let's look at the example chart of Benito Mussolini, who has Jupiter in Cancer in the ninth house, so that we don't get tunnel vision and only look at one placement. Okay, so to start off, if Jupiter is in Cancer in the ninth house, then it must be the second and fifth lords. Because if you're using a whole sign house system, which I highly recommend, and Cancer is the ninth sign, then Sagittarius must be the second and Pisces must be the fifth. And so what does it mean if we take the second and fifth lords and consolidate them in a planet that goes to the ninth house? Well, very intelligent, because the second house has to do with knowledge, the fifth house is the house of intellect, and the ninth house is the house of education. So here's a person who's very intelligent and also quite lucky, because the fifth and the ninth house have to do with prosperity and the second has to do with wealth. Now that we have that set of symbolisms, let's review what else we know about Jupiter in Cancer in the ninth house. What about Jupiter just in Cancer? What does that symbolize? Well, I have a whole video on it. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. But just to summarize right now, Jupiter in Cancer is very, very optimistic, very, very prosperous, and very, very ethical. And then let's also put up on the screen what we know about Jupiter in the ninth house, which is that they're ethically driven and natural, intelligent guide, and very prosperous and fruitful. So now that we have those three columns of meaning, to understand Jupiter in Cancer in the ninth house, all we have to do is look at those three columns and see where they're on the same page. For example, Jupiter in the ninth is very prosperous. The second and fifth lord in the ninth is very prosperous. And Jupiter in Cancer is very prosperous. So if you have Jupiter in Cancer in the ninth house, one of the big interpretations is very prosperous, very successful. Another thing is that Jupiter in the ninth house was very intelligent about how to lead people and how to guide people. And the second and fifth lord in the ninth house is also quite intelligent. So Jupiter in Cancer as the second and fifth lord in the ninth house must be a very intelligent leader. They must really know how to motivate people, how to get people to want to follow them, to want to cooperate. And they probably should also understand what people should do to get the results that they want. Finally, Jupiter in the ninth house was very ethically driven, and Jupiter in Cancer is also very ethical. So even more than the basic template, a person with Jupiter in Cancer in the ninth house is very, very driven by what they believe in. So let's look now at a real example of Jupiter in Cancer in the ninth house. Benito Mussolini. Is he a smart leader? Yeah, he's a fantastic leader. He managed to become a dictator. Is he very successful? Yeah, he was very, very successful. Yeah, but you say, yeah, he lost World War II. Okay, but you know that's comparing him to the 0.00001%. Compare him to everyday people. He's an extremely successful man. And the most interesting thing is he very value-driven or very ethically driven? Yes. Just like I said in episode 1 in this series, being ethically motivated doesn't mean that you or I will agree with his ethics. His ethics are his ethics. They might be awful in my opinion, but they're his ethics, and he lives his life by them, and he dedicates his life to them. But in general, we have to admit that Jupiter in Cancer in the 9th house doesn't really sound like a Benito Mussolini. It doesn't really sound like a macho, aggressive, tyrannical dictator. So this just goes to show that you shouldn't be tunnel visioned on any one particular interpretation. You should look at the whole soup of the whole chart. So one of the really important things to notice right away about Mussolini's chart is that he only has 3 signs occupied by real planets. This is called Trishula Yoga, and this indicates a person that has a lot of macho-ness, masculinity in their approach to life. They'll be quite aggressive, and they'll tend to get involved in a lot of fights. And they'll respond to situations by fighting with it. Besides that, it's also very key to look at his moon. His moon is surrounded by the 2 key malefics. So he's not going to be a softie, even though Jupiter in Cancer is very generous. He's not a softie. He's only going to be generous to people that really deserved and earned his generosity by doing what he told them to do. Finally, you have this additional fact that really shouldn't be ignored either, that the sun is in Leo in the 10th house. That's kind of like the icing on the cake of seeing a person who's quite, macho, manly. Understand the whole context of your chart, the soil in which your interpretive seeds grow, then visit my website, vicdecara.com, and click Readings. My complete chart report explains each and every nook and cranny of your chart and will keep you occupied in self-discovery for years. I also have 2 groundbreaking new reports. The first of these, Your Nakshatra, organizes your active nakshatras in order of their importance to you and presents the fundamental interpretations for the planets that occupy them. And the newest report, Star Strength, uses a system called Tarabala to unfold 90 interpretations of the nuanced relationships between all the planets in your chart, which paints a rich and detailed picture of how your various strengths cooperate or compete with each other. Order these or any of my reports and accelerate your journey to deeper self-understanding.